There we go. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the July 18th Historic Preservation Commission meeting. May I have roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Craignotti?
Here.
Commissioner Doom?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Shire?
Here.
And Commissioner Vartanian?
Absent.
Absent.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Monday, July 15th on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Today, we'd like to welcome a couple of young men from one of our local Boy Scout troops, Troop 319. They're in the audience today to earn their communications badge. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for coming. It's nice to have you. You're going to be so excited, let me tell you right now. It's really thrilling. Actually, you're very lucky. We have, I think, a somewhat short agenda, so you won't be here too long.
Easiest badge you'll ever get.
Yes.
Today only.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, can I have a motion to approve them?
I have no comments.
Any comments? No? Anybody?
No comments.
Have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
A motion to approve the minutes of April 18. Commissioner Doom?
Yes.
What was the second one? I wasn't sure.
Oh, Morgan.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
So we're good to approve
Okay.
it. Okay.
And then Commissioner Shire
Yes.
and Commissioner Craignotti.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. Item number 4 is oral communications. We do not currently have any speaker cards for oral communications, so we will move on to item number 5, comments from commissioners. Do any of my fellow commissioners have anything they'd like to say? Let me guess, Mike Morgan might.
I do.
Yay!
I do. First
It's
of all,
always entertaining.
well, I hope so.
It is.
I want to thank the Glendale Historical Society, first of all, for their show last Saturday. Thanks for the Memories, which is at the Alex Theater. And I can tell you, everybody that was there, and it was a pretty good packed house, and the Alex is very big. A good time was had by all.
Good.
And then in my other hat, I would like to, as it's up there on the screen right now, the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley, on Saturday, July 27th at 8 p.m. at Two Strike Park, which is at 5107 Rosemont Avenue in La Crescenta, is having their silent movies in Two Strike Park. And if you've never been, it's a lot of fun. It's free, which is the best part about it. This gentleman by the name of Joe Renudo, with his 100-year-old hand-crank projector, will show some of his favorite silent movies, Under the Stars, accompanied by special guest musician Cliff Redelick, who also works for the Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. He does a lot of their stuff, the silent movies, and he was at the Alex the other day. Great show, but we ask you to bring a blanket or lawn chair, picnic or snacks, and a flashlight to help light your way out when the event is over. Step back 100 years in time when traveling projectionists brought movies to towns too small to have a theater. This program, as I mentioned, is free and brought to you by the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley and Los Angeles County Parks. And if you've never been to Two Strike Park, it was originally put in action by Dennis Morgan, who lived up, the actor. And the reason for the two strikes was that he wanted to take boys that already had 2 strikes and make sure that they didn't have a 3rd strike. So that's the whole genesis for the park. So anyway, we look forward to seeing you Saturday, July 27th at 8 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else?
No.
So quiet. That's good. Moving on. Item number 6, old business. 1106 Rossmoyne Avenue. There is a request from the homeowner to review the owner's request to maintain the existing stucco and to delete the previously approved Mills Act condition. And we are going to be continuing that item to our August 15th meeting. May I please have a motion to do so?
I move to extend to August.
Great. Second?
Second.
Great. Roll call, please.
I'll take, Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Commissioner Doom,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
and Commissioner Craignotti.
Yes.
4-0 to continue to August 15th.
Yes. Thank you. Number 7, new business. 1837 Schurer Lane, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application. Staff is going to provide us a report, I presume?
Yep, and we have some nice pictures to share with you guys.
Great.
So here's an aerial view. I guess we have the same view on this slide of this very interesting Mediterranean Revival house on Scherer Lane. And it's proposed to be called the Howland House after its original owner, Charles Howland, and his wife, Mary May Howland, his second wife. And the architectural firm that designed this was Marston, Van Pelt and Maybury, which isn't one of those super famous names, but they did a lot of really excellent work. And I think a lot of their quality and the level of attention to detail and interesting design is visible in this house as well as in many of their more prominent works. The house was built in 1926. Give you a quick overview. I hope everyone went out to have a visit. It has the interesting split staircase, which reminds me of Ed Strangler Lewis's house on Royal Boulevard a little bit. There's the central entry. It's not a pure Mediterranean Revival because it doesn't necessarily have the full blocky rectangular volume, but it falls closer to that style, but I'd say it kind of has a little Spanish colonial influence as well. The current owners, who are the applicants for the Glendale Register and the Mills Act, have done some great research and dug up something from Pacific Coast Architect, which is the kind of images and drawings we don't normally get with our applications. And though the house has had a few changes, which we'll talk about in a bit, in so many ways it really does still capture aspects of the way it was built. In this case, you can see the driveway configuration is very different from the way it was today. This house originally fronted onto Verdugo Road, had an address of 1750 Verdugo Road, so it was a much larger lot that was ultimately subdivided, and we've seen that on many of our, especially our larger kind of estate-type properties in Glendale over the years. To think about what Marston, Van Pelt, and Maybury have done over time, and especially around the period when this house was built, you could see some of their works from Pasadena. They were very Pasadena-centric, but they also branched out into other areas. The Vista del Arroyo Hotel, which is now the courthouse, the Home Laundry building on the upper right, the amazing Grace Nicholson Treasure House, which is the USC Pacific Asia Museum. And then I just pulled another example of a colonial revival house, also in Pasadena, to kind of show the amazing diversity of their skill set. And this was common for architects of the period, less so for architects today. But I think this four grouping really shows us just how talented they were in all of the period revival styles, and then even branching off into the kind of exotic Chinese style building. I could only find two pictures, but I always think it's fun when we can put faces. So we have Marston on the left, Maybury on the right, and Van Pelt remains a mystery. So here are a couple more images from the Pacific Coast Architect magazine that featured the house. So we have full floor plans, much of the common areas of the house and the bedroom areas are similar to what was built here. The kitchen area has been remodeled, as most of the houses that we look at today have been. And then again, here's a close-up of the image of the house from that magazine. And a close-up showing the floor plans. If we want to reference back to that, we have it. And here's the interior, and the living room looks very much today as it did then, including the kind of austere fireplace that still kind of really fits the style. Here are some contemporary views to give an overview of the site, and when we look up the driveway, we can see this is where things were changed once the lots were subdivided. So we have the pavers, the driveway gate, the stone kind of retaining wall, but once we get to the house, we see that it's very intact from the original period. One of my favorite features is this loggia on the right, which is a great outdoor living space. There's a fountain on the terrace wall at this location, and then we'll see another fountain at the loggia, which we see right here. Here's the lion's head with the spout, and here's the basin where the water would be. So it's a really great, very California feature for this place. The topography is interesting around the house, and I still don't have my head around exactly how the rear yard works or what exactly it was like originally, But there's, on the bottom picture, there's a lower kind of terrace garden off of the first floor library. And then there's, I have some other pictures of the rear yard and how it relates to the second floor. But you can see the changing roof lines, the material palette, and the window openings are similar all the way around the house, except in the locations where there have been window change-outs. This terrace behind the dining and the kitchen area, the wall that we see here appears to be original. The staircase was added later to provide access, more recently to provide access up to the upper yard. And obviously this is used as kind of an outdoor kitchen area. But even as the house has a number of these perforated stucco grills, and so some of those are even facing areas that aren't necessarily at the front of the house, bringing the kind of high quality of design all the way around. Here's the view from the upper yard toward the house. The Howland family was of some interest. The nomination suggests that the house is eligible under 4 of our 5 criteria, and at staff level we disagree. We think it's eligible with some Mills Act conditions being fulfilled. For the architecture, Mr. Howland's family were the early American family, evidently Mayflower family, so very early settlers. This is the Howland family crest, and it's displayed in carved, I believe, limestone, kind of at the entry stair going up to the house, which is a feature we don't see much around Glendale. Mr. Howland's first wife was the daughter of the founder of Inglewood. He worked for this man's company, which was a continuous brick kiln company. They made a lot of brick, including for the Bradbury building. All of these things are typical of the stories we get with a lot of our nominations, where it's interesting and we're glad to have the information. But at staff level, we can't find that it rises to the level of significance to say it's eligible under criterion 1 or 2 for either the Howland Association or for broader kind of cultural associations. There have been some changes made to the house, so we want to make sure that those are noted by the commission as you think about whether this house is eligible, and if so, what kind of conditions you might be interested in. One of the more striking changes was not done by the current owners. In fact, the current owners did not make any of these changes. They've done some restorative work with the light fixtures, but previous owners did this. But the original doorway was altered, so you can see this stucco band around the perimeter of the arched opening was added, and then a narrow door with a solid wood transom was put in. We do have images of the previous door, which has also a solid wood transom and 2 narrow a double leaf door that are relatively narrow. I look at this and I don't feel this is the original door. It doesn't have the patina and the feel of an older door for a house like this. A recommended staff condition would be that this doorway be removed, the stucco be removed, and that a new door be installed that's appropriate to the style, and we'd have to do some research to work out what exactly that would be, but it would almost certainly be a door with a transom. When you look at how narrow these 2 doors are, that doesn't feel quite right, and it's certainly not super convenient, so it could be a larger leaf door with side lights and a transom, so we'd have to hear the commission's thoughts on that issue and then work together with the applicant for something that's closer to the original. You can see the ledgestone, oops, I wrote ledgestone, but ledgestone planter walls at the base of the terrace area were added by a previous owner. Definitely not something appropriate to the period or the style. Some of these photos are actually taken from the real estate, from the realty photos. So you can see these are the lamps that were installed by the previous owner. The current owners have replaced these with newly fabricated lamps that come close to matching the look of the older lamp that is in the ironwork above the door. And so this feels like good restorative work. I don't think I got that captured in the photos that I have, so take note of that. And then the other major change besides the front door is that a number of windows have been changed. Most of the windows around the house are original double-leaf wood casement windows with horizontal muntins. And then we have kind of a small variety of windows we have these multi-light sliders in this location above the garage. We have a double leaf window without any muntins. We have another double leaf window with muntins that are different than the original windows around the house, which don't have these central dividers in each leaf, the vertical dividers. They only have the horizontal lines. And then coming around the back of the house, this is the kitchen terrace area. This large window is right over the kitchen counter area. This is the type of window we see lots of change outs in houses over the years. This is a wood window, but it's a fixed picture window where often we would see a window with venting lights or casement windows on the side and a fixed window in the center. And then in the left picture, we see some other replacement windows, and I've highlighted this little guy over here. And that's pretty much the extent of the changes to the house itself. The perimeter wall doesn't appear to be original, but there was probably some kind of wall there. It's really hard to think how this site was developed, and I think Scherer Lane, which had a different name originally, did come up this far, but then it serves kind of the new community that was built up the hill over on the other side of the two. So there are certain things that I'm accepting as just part of the property, and I don't know how we would change those. But if the commissioners have thoughts about that, that's something I just want to draw your attention to. So in the staff report, I recommended conditions just for the Mills Act for replacing the front door, replacing the inappropriate windows, and then also for changing out the planters at the front with either a low curb, probably just a low concrete curb, or or possibly just bringing the planters down to grade at the driveway. And that's everything I have for my report. So.
Thank you. We'll open up the public comment. I have, is it one or two cards? Did you fill out a card also?
So we
have two cards.
Two cards, yeah.
So I'll call up the first person, Ian Marks.
Hi. Thank you for hearing our request. I really want to describe the joy that this house has brought to us and the fun it's been trying to figure out where we're going to take it and try and get it back to where it was, or at least close to it as it was. And when we first filed the application, one of the things that we wanted to point out was the desire to restore things like the windows and restore the facing of the house and the pieces that needed to bring it back to a more historic view. We didn't know at the time we originally bought the house, or even later on, the historic significance of the house until meeting with the Historic Society. When we met with the Historic Society's then executive, Sean, he put a bug in our ear about the Mills Act and doing more research, and he found a ton of information for us that got us started down the rabbit hole that we led. And he led us to a group of architects who had been listed as filing the initial permits, and then some more information about them, and also a brief family history on the Howlands, and it got us digging. And that is what made up the bulk of our initial application. But through that, I started digging a little bit more, and my wife has been digging on the internet a little bit more, and a search of Amazon found a book. And that book is on one of the architects, Mr. Marston. And then I realized that so much of the history of the house is not just the Howlands, it's the Marstons. And that is what really started driving, or the architects, Marston, Van Pelt, and Mayberry. And so I started reading the book, and then I thought, well, we'll do a little looking, and lo and behold, there's our house listed in the register of books that were projects by this architect. And we had looked into the Santa Barbara archives of Van Pelt, but they began in 1927. So they were just a little bit later. And this book was the first evidence of the level of quality that these architects brought to our region. And after digging around, we found that Mr. Howland had a guest house or a beach house built by them down in Venice, and that there was an article. And that article, we'd already submitted our application, but Jennifer, my wife, got out on the internet, and lo and behold, she found an actual copy of that article, which became that addendum that we mailed in of the Pacific Coast architect. And so that's where our goals are, is to try and reach so much more of what that house was like back then. I often joke, as does my wife, that when we win the lottery, we're taking it down to Verdugo again, and it's going to become, we're going to apply to become 1750 Verdugo. We'll make a fair offer to all of the current owners of the properties below us. But I guess the real point I want to make is that we want to get your input. We look forward to hearing what you have to assist us. We look at this as an opportunity for your knowledge, your expertise, Jay getting engaged with us to find a way to make this house right, or as close to right as we can make it historically, but still keep it livable and our home and where we want to be for the rest of our lives, and hopefully pass on through our family. But wherever it goes, it will carry this historic designation, hopefully forever, as an icon of this one house built by this group of architects in Glendale. The Howlands are neat, but I found the architects to be so much neater, and the house and the style so much different from everything else around, that I felt that it really needed to be designated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Jennifer Marks.
Thank you all very much. We really appreciate the time and attention that you've all put into this process already. I echo a lot of what my husband Ian has said. This house has been such a fun opportunity for our family as a gathering place where we all fit and are forming, our kids will remember the great events that will occur there as they grow and move on, and hopefully bring our grandkids back someday. I grew up with people who always liked antiques. And so, between that and I have always been somebody who's appreciated history. It's a rare evening when I'm not cuddled in bed reading some sort of historical novel, yes. So to me, the house is about our family, about local history, and preserving that. I mean, what more, how much bigger of an antique could I have landed with than this house? And I'd like to be a good steward and preserve this opportunity for Glendale, as well as a unique piece of the architectural history of Glendale. I think, to me, it's been so fun to research the family history. I know Jay has pointed out that it doesn't really meet criteria for the Mills Act, but to me, the house exemplifies the American dream. It was the Pilgrims. They came here with nothing, searching for freedom. And look at where all of the Howlands have ended up. I know in our packet we included the fact that these people spread to Massachusetts. They were bankers. They made all this money in the whaling industry. In the Civil War, they contracted with the Union side and fended off a lot of the blockades and things. The beach house, which we have to research, there's actually a Howland Canal in Venice, California. The island where they thought Amelia Earhart, her plane went down, is Howland Island in the South Pacific. They were some of the first seekers of and explorers of Antarctica. So this family, to me, even though it doesn't meet criteria, I think it's such a cool story that I would still love to delve into the backstory of this family some more. And clearly Charles Howland, who maybe wasn't the most prominent member, he was aware of his family history and this sort of progression of his family and the manifest destiny that he saw in his lifetime, and he was proud enough of it to put his family crest on right front and center of the house, which is pretty unique too. So, we are really excited about the opportunity to work with all of you to get your expertise in improving the quality, what is already, I think, a pretty quality structure, and making it even better still. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
With that, I'll close the public hearing, and we can chat. Commissioners, fellow commissioners, anyone have anything they'd like to say?
Well, I'd like to say it was a joy to go to the Marx's house the other day. It was just, they were so gracious, and the house is so interesting and wonderful. I get to see lots of houses, and I love seeing all the houses, but I have to say this has been one of the best afternoons, I could have spent all afternoon just talking to them about all sorts of stuff. I mean, they're really excited about the house, which is one of the things I always look for when we're putting one on the Glendale Register. Is you want somebody that really cares about the house. And I thoroughly believe that houses find the right kind of people, and I do believe that this Howland house found the marks, and they're the right people for this house because they will do it the right way. I agree with most of the stuff that staff has said as far as the things that have to be restored. I just have a quick question on the front door. You see the picture that you had up there, and it looks very much like but if you go over and show the front of the house and the other 3 windows there, they kind of give you an idea of what you have a picture from today.
The first picture.
Yeah, right there. See the 3 windows on the right there? They kind of give you an idea of exactly how the door should be, the way it's got the transom at the top, and then it opens up with, I guess, French windows.
Casement, yeah.
Casement windows, yeah. It's just,
French doors.
as much as I love round doors, and this has the most perfect round door in the front, and it would be sad to lose that door, but I guess in the end...
You mean the current door?
Yeah, the current door. I know that they've closed it in, and it's a very nice... Most doors are boxy, and the door that used to be there is very boxy, kind of French door-like. It would be sad that something like that, but with it opened up, could be put there rather than have a double doors. So that's my only concern on the front. I mean, you can't always get what you want, but
There's a song in
yeah, there is a song in there. But I see the way the door was, but those, as you mentioned, the double doors would be very small, so it would almost be nice if they could somehow make it so that you could open it up like you suggested, but at the same time have a larger door that you could get in and out of that's round, but that's up to what we decide here today. The other thing that you had mentioned was remove the ledgestone planter with planter walls below the entry on loggia terraces, but I think they had talked about stuccoing those. Was that an option?
That's just not going to work. So Ledgestone's has too much texture on it. It's possible. I shouldn't say nothing will work. Something might work. My best sense is there's so much variation in the plane of individual pieces of stone. It would be so much easier and less maintenance over time and long living to just get rid of that and put something new. But see how your colleagues feel about that, and then we'll kind of implement any conditions that you want to entertain. But I'm not an expert in that sort of thing. At first I thought it looked almost like it was dry laid, in which case it wouldn't work, but there seems to be a very thin mortar layer holding those together. And you can fur anything out and make it work, but if you're thinking of long term, how's it going to last, I'm not sure that's the best way to go.
Okay.
But as long as stucco was the result, the means and methods they could figure out.
Sure, yeah. I think stucco is an appropriate choice there. I also think
I mean, are you okay with the height?
A low concrete. Well, the height would be whatever.
Right, I mean, instead of removing them completely and having a slope come down to the existing curb below
Oh,
them,
no, maintaining.
it can stay this height.
Yeah, maintaining the configuration, I think, is appropriate, especially on the right side where there are 2 terraces.
Yeah. That's the part I was a little confused about in the report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good right at the moment.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, I'm sorry, can I ask you a question about the front door? What is your concern or your ideal for the solution?
Well, a larger round door is my
Oh, a larger round door.
yeah.
So you want
Without a transom.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think the transom would have to go. But if you look,
Well, the current transom would, but I think the options would be a very big round-headed door or a square-headed door with a half-round transom.
like the windows are right now
Exactly.
on the
yeah.
right-hand side, which I think is what the architect originally was going for when he designed the door.
Unfortunately, it's a void.
Unfortunately, square doors to me are anybody can do a square door. It takes some ingenuity to have around one. So that's my only, it's kind of what they've got now. It's kind of an homage to that, to my seeing it, but I don't know if it would be historically accurate. So I just.
What's interesting is it appears that there are two kind of gates or shutters at the door. They look solid here, but that doesn't quite make sense. That seems a little forbidding. So
Well, I think the marks
maybe they were made of wood, but
pointed it out that there are looks where there used to be hooks for the doors, the shutters themselves.
yeah. So based on the direction you give, we could look to see what evidence remains on the doorway. Ultimately, if the commission wants to review that, if it is a Mills Act condition and you want to review it, we can bring it back to you, or you can approve it for staff to review and approve. So.
Okay.
We also have a lot of other examples in Glendale of prominent entries like this that we could take a look at.
I think so,
or-
yeah.
Yeah, that are
Or-
in original condition.
Yeah, or maybe others of these architects, I mean, specifically. Okay, anything else?
I have
Yeah.
a few comments.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for bringing this before us. It was a lovely home and fun to see such a beautiful property and architecture, so thanks for taking the time. I do have a couple comments. I agree with staff and all of the conditions that were listed, but I had a question, staff, for you. In the report, you had mentioned that there was the sliding door at the rear was also a later addition, and are we proposing that as a condition to replace along with the windows?
That didn't jump out at me as, it's this area with the library, which we can see here. Looks like it had 3 windows originally. And
Patio.
when we come back over here, that was replaced with these French doors. Are we talking about this? Or
No, the back side.
Oh, it's on the
slide Where
kitchen,
you had the
right.
windows
Yeah, it's
highlighted?
this sliding
Yes.
door here. In the past, we've been accepting of certain modernizations that happen, and in a fairly tight area like this, a slider might make more sense than French doors swinging out. It didn't jump out at me as something that was unreasonable, but it's always commission's prerogative to.
Are they single light?
See what?
Are they single light, or do they have buttons?
No, they're multiple.
Are they? They look single light here,
Yeah.
and I don't.
Is it, okay, thank you.
Right, but there's no dividers in the
yeah,
glass,
here's
so.
from the
Oh, they're
real-
trifold, but they're solid glass.
Okay.
One piece of glass, okay.
Okay, so that was just a question because I saw it noted. I did notice a few other things that I'd like my commissioners to consider. On the back, on the slide that we're on right now, on the back wall, so it's be the face of the stairwell and the face of the barbecue, the stucco is different and not
Right.
original, and it's kind of like a texture coat or very textured, not
Oh,
original.
this area?
No.
The-
face of
just on the
barbecue,
stairs.
Face of the barbecue and all the way to the face of those stairs. So wrapping really that whole elevation that's protruding
barbecue.
from the wall.
Including this?
Not including that.
Just the
Yeah.
stairwell?
Stairwell and barbecue.
Oh,
Below counter.
the barbecue,
Yeah.
right, okay, I understand.
So that whole plane is a different texture and not appropriate to the house, and I would recommend that be changed to match the house.
Right. If we want to play Secretary of the Interior standards,
Right, it's supposed
it
to.
is clearly differentiated.
If you're saying that whole area.
So it's
When I looked at it, I noticed the change
We
of
should talk
stucco
about stucco.
also.
Stucco is also something we.
Yeah, for the main house, it's a huge deal. I could look at this either way, but I could say it's compatible but differentiated from the original, so it gives us a clue that this was a stairway that was added later. Obviously, the barbecue clearly wouldn't have
Yeah.
been like this
That
originally.
fine line we walk.
And so in that area too, it's very, very stark and does not fit the house. Again, once in finishes, there's no planters, there's nothing really that recalls the house. So my recommendation would be to add something in that area that would be a little bit more in keeping with the rest of the house and the architecture, rather than such stark, looks like it's kind of imprinted
we
concrete.
have one
and
earlier picture that shows it a little more furnished. Would it be a landscape treatment or,
I would think it would be both.
okay.
So is there any landscape in that, where your
Landscape
mouse
and
is?
surface choice, material
Okay.
choice.
Sorry, thank you, Nick. But go back where you were looking at the old pictures. Was there any is there landscaping in there? Is that still just solid?
Looks like there's a couple of pots.
Oh, pots.
There's a dog that humanizes it, or dog
We
sizes
need
it.
you to get a dog.
They have a lovely dog.
Anyway, that stands in stark contrast to the architecture and the style of the house, and I would recommend that there be a condition that would bring that back to more in keeping if we know that's original. The upper level yard and the stairs, you're saying there's later addition, that whole area troubles me too, but
It's a mystery, yeah.
I can let that go, but I think the area that was really around the house that you would have stepped out onto a beautiful outdoor, patio or something should be a little more in keeping with the house if we're going to put this on the exemplary example of architecture style.
So would the condition be, just so I can phrase it later when we read it back, additional planter areas possibly along the edges of the wall, and then against,
definitely
and then kind of over on the other side near the barbecue, and then pavers, terracotta pavers rather than these? Would that be?
That would be much
Because if we look at we have this precedent here of the scored concrete, but the terracotta pavers would be easier, I think, to install.
So we have painted scored concrete already there. This is just scored concrete that isn't painted.
No, these are,
Is that individual things, or is it scored?
these are, I can't remember if these are pavers set in concrete? This is scored concrete? Okay.
Yeah, it looked like imprinted concrete,
Okay, so stamped concrete.
stamped.
Okay, so we would add landscape areas and add terracotta pavers or scored concrete with a square paver type pattern, or?
Well, I would say if a material, I don't want to be prescriptive, but a material that would be in keeping with the house from 1926.
Okay.
The other question would be, are the fountains operable? If so, if not, I'd like them to be a condition to make them operable and get them working because they were beautiful.
At the end, we'll open up the public
Features.
hearing so we can ask them a couple of questions. So we'll take note of that.
Take note of that.
That question. I'll open up the public hearing at
didn't
the
have a
end.
question.
Oh, about the
Oh, you mean
fountains.
it's operable?
Yeah.
I thought Jay might know the answer.
Oh, yeah, they are not, currently, it's an interesting system. There's a valve that I'm not sure if they've opened up, but it's definitely a water valve for the lion at the loggia level, and evidently, as that basin fills, there's another drain that goes to the lower fountain, spits out there,
Cool.
and then just drains, but there's no recirculating system, so it's the kind of thing you'd turn on occasionally, but you wouldn't want to run all the time, so. But,
I think they should be operable. It's a beautiful feature of the house, especially now knowing they're tied together.
yeah, it's like,
And rare feature, too.
okay.
Those are my comments.
Commissioner Doom, anything?
No.
Okay, good.
I was looking at the pictures online, and I saw what you're talking about, and I see your point. It's not a great interest to me, knowing the narrow walkway that it is, but the pavers would be something.
So that was, I'm sorry, about the pavers? Or about the
I
door?
can see her point on the pavers, but
Okay.
as for landscaping, that little narrow area, I'm not sure if it's for cooking and stuff. And I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you again for allowing us to visit your home. It's beautiful. I almost missed you. I got there a little before you did, so I was glad to get to chat with you and hear some of your ideas. I like the idea of stuccoing over those walls. I thought the way the report was written that we would be removing them completely and be left with a curb, and I was just thinking the slope and everything would not be fun to have to deal with. So that something can be done there is great. I feel like the condition should be something along the lines of a stucco wall should be put there that is to be maintained in good condition. And if the trick is to cover it like the homeowner's talking about, and over time that deteriorates, then the wall would be replaced. I don't necessarily think we should require it to be replaced immediately. If we can get the look that we want, the homeowner knows they have to keep it maintained. And if it ultimately fails, then replace it then, kind of idea. But obviously I agree also with the windows and the front entry door. It'll be interesting to, I really think those shutters that we have the picture of are pretty darn awesome. I could see a condition of requiring the shutters to be put back on the front door that you have that picture of.
Yeah, there would be a little speculation going in there. We have a good example on Kenneth Road, that's, I can't, the house that looks like a face. It's the Spanish house on the corner of, I don't think it's Cleveland, it might be Virginia and Kenneth. And it's
The Mills Act House?
It's Mills Act
Highland.
House, it's
Stafford
a tennis
House?
court. What's that?
Oh, with a fountain.
Oh, it is the Stafford
Yes,
House.
the fountain house.
Highland and Kenneth.
Yes.
Highland?
That one has gates.
Yeah, it has gates in a very similar
Yeah.
configuration. These definitely look solid here.
Yeah.
And I would think they would be wood rather than metal,
Yeah.
solid metal, unless they had a concern. Well,
Yeah. I mean, those I think are a really dramatic feature that I would love to see put back, especially since we have an actual reference photo, at least a decent reference photo, may not be exact. I mean, I would be open to them being slatted or solid or whatever, but I think wood, it almost seems like those were the formal door that would be closed, and then behind it, perhaps there was this utilitarian double door that could be opened up and maybe wasn't dramatic. I don't know.
this house would have had a nice door, I would think. So.
It just seems weird that those double doors were there.
What we could do is explore this, and the Commission has written conditions before where we do the best research that we possibly can. I would be really hesitant, just the Secretary of the Interior Standard 4, I think, is the one that says that you shouldn't build or add things. Yeah, but you guys don't know.
You don't get to guess.
But it's in your books. So,
Yeah.
But we don't want to add things that are speculative. And when we have something as vague as this, unless I could support this by seeing its typical, well, it could be louvered shutters, for example, like
Yeah.
wood shutters. And if we saw that was typical, and especially if we saw other Marston buildings that had that, then I'd be more comfortable, and I could come back and report to you, yes, we've decided that we found something appropriate. But I would be hesitant to speculate beyond without that research.
Okay, well, I would like, then maybe that condition is that it's not certainly a requirement, but we could do what you were just suggesting doing. And given the situation you just described of researching it, I kind of would feel the same way about the fountains.
Mm-hmm.
There may very well be a reason why those fountains are not operating anymore. The plumbing may be just so shot, and if it goes under hardscape, just having had experience with trying to get old fountains to work, I'm not sure that's and the fact that it doesn't recirculate just seems to me that I think as an absolute condition is not necessarily something I would feel comfortable putting on it, but certainly a recommendation that some research be done about it. If it's as easy as just flipping a few switches, maybe, and they feel comfortable wasting the water. I mean, that part I kind of have a little bit of a problem with.
Well, the research could be as simple as figuring out how to turn it on, holding a bucket under the upper one and saying, okay, in 1 minute it put out this much water, and then going to the lower one and saying, in another minute, does it put out the same amount of water? That could tell you that there's no leak during the pathway underneath the house. I would say if we thought there was a leak or the potential for a leak down there, that would be a huge project. That would be a lot of excavation.
Yeah.
Could start damaging the historic fabric in a way we don't want to.
Do we know that it actually turns on? I mean,
I don't think so, but there's a valve. There's
okay,
a valve that
but
you need to
we don't know if it's an
for,
old
so.
rusted galvanized pipe. We don't know if it's been removed during other construction. We don't really know what's leading to that pipe. It's not as simple as just trying to crank the thing open. You know, it could mean that pipe could be bad, and it may not even work, and then you got to figure out where that pipe goes. And I just don't feel comfortable putting that as an absolute. I don't personally feel comfortable as putting that as an absolute condition. It could be something that is explored and.
Could I speak to that?
Of course.
Just,
Of course.
just out of past, in my experience here on this commission, whenever there has been a historic fountain, we have always made it a requirement
Yes,
to
we did
have
that.
it operational. And obviously, there's ways you can go about it. You can also add a recirculation pump to it. You can update things as well as getting it working. So I can think of 3 examples off the top of my head of properties we have. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's such a beautiful feature.
Yeah.
And to celebrate that for a Mills Act property and on the register is pretty important. So
Yeah. Well, having been intimately involved with having to comply with that condition, I can tell you that it's not as simple as that, unfortunately. And it could end up being.
we never
it
say
could,
it's simple.
well, but it
We
could
say
ultimately be.
it's the right thing to do for
Correct.
the property.
Okay. Well, I'm going to respectfully disagree.
No, and what we do is at the end of this, I read back all of the conditions I've heard, And if there's a condition that I didn't hear consensus on, then we'll specifically focus on that one, and we'll go down the line, take a vote, and
Okay.
that's how we do it with DRB, and we've done it with HPC before. So.
Okay. All right. So that then concludes my comments. Did we have any? Oh,
I
do. You
do.
wanna,
I have
more?
one,
Sorry.
well, two.
Okay.
Commissioner Shire, I agree, because we did that on Strangler Lewis's house. They had, in the very front, they had a fountain that we requested that they fix, and they did fix it. I mean, things
Did
can
we
be
on that
done.
one?
What?
No, I don't remember doing it on Strangler's house. We did it on the Stafford house, which had that side fountain. We did it on the house on Cortez, and maybe we did it on the Strangler
I'm
Lewis.
pretty
I just
sure
don't
we
remember
did,
that.
but yeah, I do know it's running.
Okay.
I mean, they fixed it and had it run. I just have a question for Commissioner Shire. If you could go to the patio, the rear patio with stairway to upper. Okay, yes, so the picture in the upper left-hand corner, is that kind of what you're envisioning for softening? Because you see the one on the bottom right, there isn't anything because,
It's not far back enough. Yeah.
yeah, it isn't far back enough, but when you pull back on the camera, it is softened. They've put in, you know,
Oh, you mean to extend with some more planters down at the other end?
right.
Yeah, and that and adding, warmer, more appropriate finish material.
Okay.
Would be, yeah. Those two things would add a lot.
Okay.
And then we don't obviously regulate furniture, but once furniture gets put in there
Yeah.
with these things, it'll
Yeah.
kind of bring it back. So.
Yeah, I think actually I'm glad you brought this back up because this is actually another one I have a little bit of a hard time with. I like, to Jay's point about the stucco on the wall being different, that I think is a very valid point. To have it be compatible but differentiated, I think is an important thing to consider. I'm a little worried about, it doesn't jump out as me as something that's necessary, including more landscaping there. I think it's the kind of thing where a homeowner would probably do, I don't know. I feel like there's stamped concrete elsewhere in the house. It's not that far off, that different. So my personal opinion is, if you're going to be going, you said you're going to go condition by condition and we're going to vote on them. Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah, when we need to, yeah.
Okay. So, okay. I will probably not vote for that particular condition. Okay. Any other comments from commission?
No, that's it.
Any reason why we would need to speak to the homeowners? Any reason, anybody have any questions for them?
Unless they've been waving their hands that they object to any of the conditions we've talked about, but I don't.
No, we just have more information potentially for you on several of those subjects.
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll open the public comment, public forum.
So, gentlemen,
We're going to call up the homeowners, Ian and Jennifer Marks again.
so there were a couple, I guess we can start with this since it's right there. It is furnished now and has a large, did you go back there at all? I don't know.
I snuck back
did,
there
but-
before you got home.
Yeah.
You should get a padlock for your side gate.
Waiting to do is if we did this, was to find out what the suggestions were of things to do back there. We haven't touched it.
Okay.
Like much of the house, we didn't want to do anything until we had heard from the commission on what kinds of things you suggested, because we're learning and we're hoping that you can help guide us. And so I love the suggestions that are coming, because then I can take these and hopefully synthesize them into something that works for the house, the commission too, but I think I want the house to be right. And so that back area, I've always envisioned tiling that area where the
Where the steps.
where the steps are,
The mismatched
the
stucco.
the mismatched stucco, and doing some type of a tile or something to bring out some color and a little more imagination to that space. But we didn't want to do anything out of fear of doing something, then you go, that's got to go. And so we've been holding out. So we're
Or
open to-
that would be another possibility for a fountain on that wall.
Planters would be very challenging.
Planter,
It's
yeah.
very narrow. And the space to put in something like what we have with the plants that are around the air conditioning units on the other end of that patio and by the ping pong table, there really is, if we're going to use it the way we would want to use it, which is we have a dining room table out there now, and it's an outdoor dining space for us, there wouldn't be a place to still do that and put any planters in. But what we'd rather do would be something that would make that kitchen area, that wall, that sort of very stark space a little bit more in tune with the property. So,
But
The
even-
other, oh, sorry.
Oh, even change in finished material that would be more appropriate to the house, that would kind of bring that element of Spanish architecture there. And potted plants, I mean, that would still do the same.
And we have
achieve
that.
the same.
I don't. Did you?
It's
I don't know.
it's the gray.
We have one photo that shows this.
The dog photo.
Yeah,
it's
so
pretty
that whole
dark.
section where the kitchen part of it is all covered in planters now.
Okay.
It's got planters and succulents, and we've got shelving with smaller pots and plants, and all through that area. So that's
So then just
we've
dressing,
covered as much as we could.
dressing the finished material would solve it. It's
My-
just gray stamped concrete with the house of your caliber and architectural style and elegance. Just it takes away from it.
We don't disagree, not even a little bit.
Yeah. My other thought about the concrete, part of what bothers me about the concrete is that I think that the color of it is such a poor match for anything else on the house. And I don't know, because the precedent has been set for stamped concrete elsewhere, if there's a way to just color it differently to make it look, like it's the Saltillo tile kind of color, or I don't know if you can
Well,
do that.
if you remember
after
our
it's been-
concrete guy who did our last house driveway, he showed us some pictures of things that he's done, and one of the things, and things like that, where he literally there's like a coating he puts over it, and then can put a different pattern in it, and it's very. He swears it's durable, but something like that, we don't disagree. It's very stark, but we've been kind of waiting for this in order to do anything to it.
Well, we're glad you waited.
Yeah.
It was a smart
Well,
move.
I think we want to give it a little bit more flavor, a little more color, a little more feel for the rest of the house. And so any suggestions you have, great. Planters I do worry about, just because we'd have to break up concrete to put in planters over
irrigate it
there.
and a whole bunch of
and there's
stuff.
no room. The table and space for all of us, because we have a herd, there's just not enough room for putting in a lot of stuff next to those doors.
The other thing that Ian and I had talked about, we went to the Historical Society function where some of the antique tile dealers set up shop.
Oh, the Restoration Expo. Yeah.
Yes, and one of the dealers that we've talked to several times has enough tile for an entire bench of antique tile that would go from like the kitchen area down that retaining wall. That would be, some.
Oh, there.
I think
It's a
there- I think
beautiful
there-
bench. It
There are
was-
so many options. It was some,
Yeah.
Hollywood B-movie actress's backyard that got dismantled, and he has the entire thing. It certainly doesn't have to be that, but I think that there are a myriad of possibilities if, we can all.
Is there a lot of tile at the house? Is there a lot of decorative tile around the house? There's none,
There's
right?
no, that's not true.
Where do
on
we
the
have decorative
on the
tile?
loggia,
Oh, that's true, on the
there are
loggia.
a couple of very peculiar Arabic tiles, which is peculiar in the sense
Oh,
that
yeah.
the guy was a very devout Christian.
Yeah.
And this is,
And then to have the first two tenets of Islam in tiles,
We don't
in
understand.
Arabic script,
and then
in his loggia. Was,
yeah, they're around the
Yeah,
base
the
of
tile
the
panels.
fountain, which I'm sorry, I didn't include any.
But yeah, that's the only real
And then-
decorative tile.
Okay.
Yeah, under the openings, it's much more in the flavor of the coat of arms. It has a knight detail on it.
Okay. So this
so
one
it's
of
a little bit, but-
the things Jay was explaining regarding the Secretary of Interior standards is when you change or if you add to a historic space, you want it to be compatible, but you don't necessarily want to be trying to make it look like it was originally there. And so that's the challenge we have sometimes I do anyway, as a commissioner, is helping figure out what exactly that means. So I was asking about the tile because at first I'm thinking, well, gosh, if there's tile around the house, we should try to mimic that type of a thing. But at the same time, we really probably shouldn't try to mimic it. So
And one thought I had, I agree that we shouldn't be applying tile to this area, but as works of art, you can get beautiful tile plaques and panels that are kind of framed, and you hang it on the wall, and they're weatherproof and look great.
Yeah.
So that would be a possibility that we wouldn't regulate. We don't care what you put up there, art-wise or plant-wise, if you have shelves or whatever.
So we would, but the goal would then to not have some condition regarding the face
I would recommend
of it.
against applying tiles to these walls.
So we'd have to be very
Make
careful with the
kind of a
condition
permanent
says.
installation.
They have to, if it's hanging, if it's not a fixture, if it's not attached, we have to be careful with our condition.
Well, no, yeah, my suggestion for the condition was really just the floor.
The
and
floor.
surface, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, we don't like it either.
Yeah, we don't like it either.
Okay, good.
So, yeah, we're completely
Okay.
down with that.
Okay. And then based on what the Marks
good
has just
ideas.
said, The idea of a poured surface on top of this, probably not something we would recommend. I'm interested to hear if the commission is open to a tinting of what's here. I don't know this material, if it's really just concrete. It looks like it might have some sort of acrylic in it, which makes it harder to tint. And then those things wear off over time, so we're going to have a short-term solution regardless. Terracotta pavers or something like that is a super long-term solution.
Though that it would mean excavating what's there, I would think, depending on how that threshold is probably.
Possibly tiling over it.
I'm not sure you couldn't tile over it.
Okay. Is there a big enough step?
Yeah, there's a lip there.
Yeah, it
at
looks
the
like
door.
there's.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it-
And then also around the edge of the, you can see it below the stainless steel doors of
Yeah,
the
you've got
kitchen
room.
area, there's a little space there that would actually probably be about right to get, we wouldn't go with big, huge, thick Saltillo ones, but I think that the thinner, smaller tiles might work.
Could there be a code compliance issue, Jay, with rise over run with the steps at the back and all that?
Possibly.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
these are the things. These are the.
Just finish it.
Okay. I would hate for the commission to be requiring him to do something that is ultimately not something he should be doing. These are the things we have to be considerate of.
We could leave a landing at the base of the stairs and then open up the,
It's gonna make
place the tile further away. Sure.
Without drainage and the whole thing. I mean, come on now.
We want to make it.
Okay.
But not necessarily, but.
Or you can talk-
Yes, sorry, Nick. Go ahead. Nick is wanting
Since
to
you're
ask.
up here, can you address the fountains and the door concerns?
Yeah, so I'll start with the door because we've got some examples of what Marston, thank golly, we have the examples of the kinds of things that Marston did, including some doors and gates. Our original vision with looking at it was, well, first off, get rid of that door. We really, I think even our application, we put in that we wanted to get rid of the replacement windows and that door.
Sweet.
Because it doesn't match with the spectacular nature of the entry of that house. It needs to be a spectacular entry. Jennifer and I have loved the gate type entries, which are appropriate to the style and type of house, and some of the things that Marston did, but he also did heavy solid doors that were of that shape. But I couldn't find a single example of a double set where there was an interior door, but things that I've seen before in homes of this time where the glass doors like you have on the triple door or triple
Windows?
window doors, French doors that we have, as the interior door, and a heavier wooden formal door on the outside, so that you would close up the house, you would
Yeah.
close up those outer parts, while having essentially the same type of glass door as the interior one, with all that light, with all that kind of flowing into, because this house is made to flow from out to in and in to out. It just,
Exactly.
it fits with the idea of the house. That was doing the negotiations with the other half here. She loves the metal grate doors, the wrought iron, which I think would
the
look great
gates,
with the other wrought iron features of the house. But we have options, and Marston had options. There were a lot of different ways that he addressed this. And so, and I have a number of pictures of different options here in the book that if you want to borrow, you're welcome to look at, or as we go forward, I highlighted a few of them.
That's probably
But I
something you'll
think
work with
that
Jay on, yeah.
We want something that is
Yeah.
spectacular and matches the home and is historically appropriate based on what we know of what
Yeah.
Marston and his
I
style.
was hoping there was some kind of a record we could
There
refer
are
to.
a number of different versions of doors that have very similar entries, the same concrete pattern. He actually has homes with the identical pattern with different doors that don't have the double
Interesting.
opening. Yeah, but some do. But they're the solid door. The whole entire door is that way.
Based on I feel pretty confident that you guys are going to be able to work that out.
The door shouldn't.
The doors and even if there's outer doors and all of that, yeah.
The fountain I worry about, just having done some rudimentary inspections of, I want to try and do something with the fountains. I don't know, I would love to have them run. And that would be a nice ideal. But having looked at the pipe and looked at where it is, it runs underneath that entire concrete. It was placed, I would assume, when they built it, underneath the concrete from the loggia around that or underneath that terrace to get to where the fountain is. There is a whole section of terrace, concrete, from about me to the other side of your table, where that pipe goes someplace. And if I can make it work, I would love to. If I can't, I want to do something to keep it preserved, but I also don't want a big water waster that's going to leak all over the place once I finally get it connected.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I feel like I would feel more comfortable, commissioners, if it was some kind of a recommendation and not a condition. These conditions, it's a contract. He's got to make it work, and it's just too much of an unknown. It's one thing to say, yes, change out these windows. That's fairly benign, fairly simple. But something like this, none of us have looked at this closely enough to have any idea what they'd be
If I
facing.
can get the top one, my goal, and she wasn't really down with it. I really wanted to tile in that lower one and make it with like something like an Italian or Portuguese style tile, which would go along with the Mediterranean style of the house rather than a Spanish. But some type of tile around that lower fountain, not restoring it to function, but at least to the beauty that it is.
Okay, so just keep in mind something like that don't go doing that without talking
Right.
to Jay.
No,
as long as you know that.
we
Because
haven't-
it's probably not something that would be appropriate, to be honest with you. As lovely as it sounds, we always have to remember we've got to stay appropriate to the house. So modifying an existing feature is less
Okay.
We
appropriate.
would love to get, I mean, I'm sure you've worked with many fountain professionals that we would be more than happy to, really.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Yeah, well, we can certainly look into that. I think we would love, in theory, as Ian said, to get them running. I don't know if there's any way to separate the plumbing and make each of them function individually so that it's not such a potential risk to the
Right.
innards of the house.
But,
I
and
don't
the
know how
priority
feasible
for
that
me,
is.
just when I stop and think, and I literally, we did this because of the historic nature of it. We literally have no idea how the tax savings, we have no idea. What
Nobody
we
does,
make.
by the way. Nobody, not until you get it. Nobody can do the math.
And so we don't know what finances we're going to have, what type of resources we're going to have. I mean, if we get only a small tax savings, it might be 20 years before we could. I'm just,
Well,
I mean, there's some hyperbole there,
yeah.
but it might be a very long time that we can afford to do the door, which is going to be not a cheap process, and the windows, which won't be horrible, but will still be an expense, and trying to get that back area appropriately paved, colored, whatever we decide to do, compared to a fountain that looks lovely now and is more or less intact from an external view. I'd love to make it work, but it's just so low priority. I didn't even think about it as being something for the restoration because it doesn't change the beauty of the house,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, it
So-
does when you see it come to life.
And I don't disagree. If we could, but the priority for me is to make the house.
Understood.
So that was the thoughts on the fountain. We have not tried, but I did dig around in there and followed the pipe from where it exits the concrete to go back under the concrete to get to that lower portion. And it's an old lead pipe.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So-
Okay.
But there are some great views of different doors of similar styles that I think we can use as a
Good.
guide to make sure that we are within the spirit of the home, which is what we really want to put there.
Anybody else have any questions for our homeowners?
Nope.
No, thank
No.
you
Okay.
so much.
With that, we'll close the public hearing. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Jay, what would you like to do next?
You guys can either deliberate a little more based on what you just heard from the homeowners, or I could read back the conditions and we can just kind of go down.
Why don't you read them back, and if we need to deliberate on one, we'll do that, and then we'll vote.
Okay, so we have the staff condition that seemed uncontroversial to replace the windows that need to be replaced.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on
New
that.
wood, single pane windows,
Yes.
true divided lights. We have the condition to cover over or remove the ledgestone planter walls at the front of the house in whatever manner to give it a stucco appearance that's appropriate to the house.
Yes.
We have, now it gets more complicated.
Say yes or just nod, or
Yeah, we're just, if someone has a,
this objection. it's
We
big
have,
objections.
I think everyone agrees that the front door needs to be replaced. The
Yes.
full extent of the opening needs to be restored, and that I will work with the Marxes, looking at their book, looking at possibly other buildings, other houses of similar style in Glendale. May even have to take a field trip to Pasadena, have a look to see what's appropriate. I reiterate my concern about the outer shutters with, unless there's like really clear-cut evidence that this is something they were doing and it really kind of evokes the way this dark image looks, I'd be hesitant to go there, but I'll also go to the house again and look to see where the pintles, where the hinges are installed, just to verify that that's there. gives us a sense of how it was.
I'm okay it
installed.
not being an absolute condition, but that we would be open to them doing that if you find that it's
Yeah, and we've
appropriate.
written conditions like
Yeah.
that, where based pending research, this will happen, and if research isn't borne out, then we'll leave it with just a new door. So it'll be a new wood door of appropriate style, and again, this will be based possibly on the research. It may have some glass in it, maybe a solid wood door. I find you see solid transoms, but you don't see them as much in Glendale. It seems almost like a European thing you see more. So research will help with that. So the door, I think we all agree on, or you all agree on.
Yes.
And then we have, I didn't get any concurrence on restuccoing the rear stairs at the bar and the barbecue area, letting that rougher texture stucco stand.
I'm okay with letting the rougher stucco stand.
I too.
And
You already know my thoughts.
okay, 3-1. I think there was some concurrence on making the rear behind the kitchen terrace area a little less stark. Primarily, I think the concurrence was on repaving that area. Landscape, we heard some arguments, and I'm not sure if commissioners have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm
Adding
okay not-
landscape areas?
Repaving's fine.
Yeah, repaving.
Paving's fine. And then we have the potential condition on the fountains. There was definitely disagreement on that, and I'm not sure exactly where that stands. So if you want to discuss that, and let me know.
I'm for making them operable.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm for not forcing that condition on them. A request, perhaps. Talk
We
to
don't
me
do
about
that-
this.
we don't do that
Talk to me
in
about this
Millsack.
research thing. I mean,
Well,
research by a plumber. I mean, right? I mean, can we
they
say,
could do the bucket thing that I talked about. The question is, yeah, we could do it pending research that there are no leaks. I just can't guarantee, I don't know what the outcome of that's really going to be.
well, the leaks,
It's a little unusual.
I'm less concerned about the leaks as I am water getting to it. I mean, the leaks is one thing, but is there water even that you can turn on a spout and water comes out? I mean, that's as much of an issue as whether they're actually tied together without leaks.
And if there weren't, this is the back, the lower picture, the left side, this is the rear wall of the loggia. It wouldn't be too difficult to retrofit a water source through this wall, which is sort of back of house, to.
Is there a bathroom near there? Is there already plumbing
sprinklers
near
there.
there?
Well, there appears to be a water line there that has a valve that's built into the wall next to the fountain, so.
So you can just access from the back side.
No, I
Whether
understand. Yeah, I mean, I
whether that's galvanized.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Well, it opens up, a technical issue that may require opening up walls and all of that. We could ask them to try to turn on the water and see what happens. And, and if in the future they find out there's a leak and they shut off the fountains, I don't know what we would do.
Yeah,
You don't need a permit. There's nothing that would lead to our review of that kind of change. So
I just don't feel comfortable putting that. Not knowing enough information, there's just not enough information for me to be.
yeah, I'd
feel
rather
like
have
I
it be
could-
either or. Restore them,
Okay.
and we'll figure out how to
Okay.
do it. If it's impossible and the plumber comes back and says we can't do it, I'll come back to the commission and say, this is what they found. And then,
Okay, well, wait a minute.
but then
How
the
does that
other
work?
alternative is to not bother with the fountains at all.
Okay, so talk to me how that works. I thought once a condition is in the contract, how do we change it? How do we as a body remove it? We just say we're taking that out of the contract that these people have with the
We
city?
don't. It's similar, if you read the staff report for the 1106 Rossmoyne, there was a condition that there was anecdotal evidence from the neighborhood that there had been some brick with extruded
Yeah.
mortar joints on the face of the house.
Yeah.
I went out and researched it physically on the site. I couldn't find any evidence of that. Doesn't mean it wasn't there. We couldn't find any archival photos of it. And so the commission's Millsack condition was, if we find evidence, restore it. If you don't find evidence, then let it stand as it is. So it would be a similar kind of formula.
Like research due
Yes.
diligence and staff weighs in on the
Okay,
results.
so I know that nothing is impossible. There is a way to get those fountains functional again. The way they're currently designed, they waste water. So we can't make them recirculating necessarily from the bottom to the top. Maybe individually they could be recirculating, but I don't think we should be mandating that a fountain that wastes water is something that it should be done. Number two, just because something is possible doesn't mean that it's cost effective. It could be $50,000 for them to make this fountain work, or $30,000 to make this fountain work. We're not in the business of putting dollar figure caps on things, but maybe we need to set the precedent that that's something that happens, because I don't think from past experience, these things are can be a lot more difficult than we know, and none of us have really done any research on this particular fountain at all to know whether or not it's as easy as it sounds. We just don't know, and I just don't think it's fair to put that
what we're
condition on
saying
there.
is that Jay will work with the homeowner to do research and proper due diligence on the fountains and getting them to operate. And Jay is a very reasonable man, and he also has historic preservation at heart, and he knows what we're after. And I would trust Jay to make the right decision with the homeowners.
Jay, do you have a financial threshold for
based
something
on-
like that in your mind?
Based on your research.
Personal?
No, I mean, you're the one that's going to make this decision.
We-
What's the cost limit for you on something like that?
We don't have a cost limit. We've
Right.
never established one. And the thing we do is we establish a time frame when the commission thinks that a condition is going to be pretty expensive. We give
Yes.
years. If it's a quick fix, we give 1 year. So
Okay, so what you're telling me is they could come back to you and say, this is going to cost us $60,000, and you aren't necessarily in a position where you can say, no, you don't have to do
no,
it then.
I would come back to the commission and let you know. And if it's unreasonable, you might make
So, I
that
mean, he's
decision.
very reasonable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I have personally tried to do that, and I got nowhere. So I'm going to tell you right now, no matter what wherever this conversation is going, I absolutely do not feel comfortable with that condition. Just so you all know.
You
as my
personally
fellow
tried to
commissioner.
do that.
Yes.
Do what with?
Yes. I stood before this commission and requested that condition be removed from a Mills Act contract because it was very, very challenging to make a fountain work. And they had tried, nothing was good enough.
yes, I know.
And yes, you do know what I'm talking about.
Now I do,
And while it may be working now and someone spent a heck of a lot of money on it, that particular homeowner had a really hard time with it. And it's very difficult to get these things off the contract. And I just want everyone here to understand that. Everyone here on the commission to understand
We
when something
were
like
there
that
for
is
those
on there.
commission meetings.
This
Right,
one was not here. I just
exactly.
want him to
Thank you.
understand that. He was not here for that.
I was
Could I-
not, okay.
You weren't here
Could
for
I
that.
make a motion?
Was that the last
Make
one?
sure. Let me just make sure I've captured everything.
I don't think we voted on the fountain, actually.
Okay. We've said no to adding, well, the applicant suggested adding colorful tiles. I think there was concurrence not to do that, but to bring color and life in other ways that are more movable and less permanent. And yes, you may vote on the fountain.
Can I speak to the fountain quickly?
Of course.
I'm sorry I was not a commissioner for this whole deal. It sounds very exciting to have witnessed. In my trials with the fountain at my house, we have a self-running fountain. And it was a long history putting it in. On my salary, I don't have a lot of money to afford a fountain. I tapped into an existing sprinkler line and made it work. It's not that difficult. Looking at the back wall, if they have access to a sprinkler line, it's not as hard as it seems to be for that particular fountain. I agree that if it was a condition of the original house, and it's like we talk, if it's attached to the original house, and it should be with all due diligence that we can afford, although I don't like putting a price tag on something, since we do throw around, doors and driveways and walls with prices on everything else. But like Commissioner Shire said, I would trust Jay to do his due diligence to make sure that it, as you described, it does not waste water, first, it is functioning, and is there a reasonable method to make it work? And we can come to that conclusion. I'm happy with that.
Okay, so are we good on the fountain? Are we ready for a motion?
He's raising his hand. Can we open a public hearing
Commissioner
again?
Morgan has not.
I'd like to.
No, I'm in Desiree Commissioner Shire's
Okay.
camp on this one, so.
I'd like to open the public hearing one more time and call the homeowner up again. Mr. Marks?
One of the things that I'm hearing is that there's a possibility I'm going to be asked to cut a hole through an existing wall to get to this thing to try and fix it and remove what is original stucco, original wall,
Have to match it.
cut that
patch
out,
it.
and then have to go back and try and make it match and repaint that wall. We're not talking about going through a hole or something small. We're talking about a multi-square foot area that we would have to remove from that wall to even access that fountain. So if I would be leery of going into any contract that would require me to destroy a portion of the house, if that's a requirement. I don't know if that's what you're asking me, but when I'm hearing this, it's, well, you can just tap into it. That's a whole wall to go through, and that's my worry, is it's not a matter of going underneath or anywhere else. It's going through the wall.
And down the wall, because
And
you
down
can't
the
have an
wall.
exposed pipe up the back of the wall.
That's
It's got to go
correct.
all the way through the wall. We don't know if that's a cinder block wall. We don't
So
know
if
what
there's a
it's made of.
condition that I would be more comfortable, it said, without penetrating existing walls, without penetrating existing concrete, or having to remove existing structure of the house, I'd be more comfortable with that. And I want to try and make this thing work, but I would never cut through our house to get to, or the loggia, or the concrete, or the walls to get to that fountain in order to make it work.
Okay,
I can
thank you.
address that if you
Yes,
like.
yeah, sure.
Okay, public hearing closed?
Do you want him up there to answer your comment?
I don't know.
Okay.
My comment will just inform his position.
Well, I'll close the public hearing.
Penetrations are made through walls of historic houses all the time, and it's not really an issue. The only reason I mentioned that, when I saw this photo that we had it available, since there was some concern about the possible leak source at the other side of the fountain, the back side of the fountain where the water is coming in from that valve, if there was concern about that, I just pointed out that there is this kind of back of house wall area where we already have the electrical panel and its penetrations and conduits as a possible way to do it. I don't think, the commission should make its decision, in listening to the owner, of course, but I don't think it would be, I don't think it would damage the house in any way to have to come through this wall to bring a new water source to the fountain if you decide to restore the fountain.
Okay. Just to be clear, I just want to point out 2 points one last time. None of us have inspected this fountain. I'm not sure, Mr. Groom, did you visit the house?
No, but I'd be happy
Okay.
to look at a fountain.
Okay, so he didn't visit the house.
No, I'm sorry.
So you're not in a position to really to speak to the two fountains that are supposedly connected. And number two, apparently, according to what we've been told, if this fountain is restored to its original function, it will literally waste water. All right? It will not recirculate water, it will waste water. So we're mandating that a homeowner create a fountain that will waste water.
Well, we actually aren't.
Right.
We're asking for them to be operable. You can always upgrade and put in recirculation. That's been done all the time. I can say that from personal experience. And so we're just asking Jay to have the homeowner research, do due diligence, try to get them operational, and Jay will make the call. He'll bring it back to us if necessary. Otherwise, he can work with them on a solution.
And we don't also mandate that they keep it on.
No, of course not. But then 1 ounce of wasted water is wasted water, as far as I'm concerned. And to mandate that someone have to do that is not appropriate in my mind. So then I'm just a little bit, so we're now leaving the decision of whether the fountain is operable up to Jay, according to what you said. Right?
Having him work with the homeowners on the research and due diligence to try to get them operational.
Okay, so there is a chance that Jay can come back to us and say, yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah, there's a chance.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Exactly.
There's a chance in either direction, but at least we're closer to having them operable than saying absolutely nothing.
There's a chance
Maybe
we turn the
not.
valve and everything works and it's not leaking and they
it's
choose to turn it
beautiful.
on if guests come over and when no one's there, they turn it off. And
That's just a precedent.
So this is
Kind of
different than
call.
Stafford House in that Stafford House, there was no condition like that. It was absolutely, it had to be operational. There was no opportunity for the homeowner, at least not codified in the contract,
That
for the
is- that is
for the
correct.
homeowner to work.
the
That is
condition for the Stafford House, not that we want to relitigate this, but the condition was not worded as well as it could have been.
That's what I'm
And
getting at.
staff learned a lesson
Thank you.
from that condition that we will now have a much better worded condition.
Okay.
Which I'm sort of jotting down right now as I'm listening to you guys, so.
Would you like a minute to do that?
Well,
we-
no, I will say staff will work with applicant to do due diligence to determine the possibility of whether the fountain can be restored to operation in its current condition or through a mitigation or a kind of a
Modernization.
modernization, just through additional work that will bring a water source to the fountain. And if it is possible to do this within reasonable means giving us some, so I'll jot that down, reasonable means.
leeway.
The applicant will bring this back to usability, but not necessarily to constant use. So
course,
bring it back to
yeah.
operation.
Operational.
Yeah.
And tell me if you guys want me to say anything else or word that
Sounds
differently.
Works well.
Because I'm going to have to go back to the tape to do this. I hate going back to the tape.
And then have we talked about timelines?
We should.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Thoughts on timelines?
I would recommend for the quantity of items and the scale of some of them that we would consider between a 3 to 5 year timeline.
I agree with that.
Yes.
I'm going to push towards the longer end of that, but you need a hard number, right, Jay?
We have had ranges, but we've broken it down to certain work is
Okay.
3 years, certain work is 5 years. So
Does anyone want to
of
work
us
on breaking that down, or
less
should we
than
just pick one number?
Well, why don't we
Always the
put the door on a three year and the windows on a 5 year, or vice versa with the fountain and other things on the 5 year?
And maybe the planter walls? That doesn't seem as if it goes with the plan he's thinking of, it's not as destructive,
Do
right?
half and half.
Maybe.
Half on the 3 and half on the 5.
Yeah, maybe like the planter and the door on the 3 and then everything else on the 5.
That's fine.
Okay, so the windows, the fountain,
And maybe the pavers on the 3.
and the rear pavers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Pavers on the 5,
on the 3.
on the 3.
And they'll have the benefit of it looking much
Five
better.
is more generous than the commission typically gives. It's
Yeah.
usually
Mm-hmm.
4 years at the outside, but 5 is fine if that's what you'd like. So right now I have the front door, the planter walls, stucco at the front, and the pavers at the rear kitchen terrace for 3 years, which is from December 31st of this year. And then windows, all of the windows and the fountain within 5 years. And did we miss, we got all of the conditions, I think.
I think we did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Who wants to make it?
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you.
So I would like to recommend to City Council that the property at 1837 Shear Lane be called the Howland House and be designated as a historic resource in the Glendale Register of Historic Properties and be granted the Mills Act with the following conditions that staff discussed earlier. I will just list the topics. I will let you keep the verbiage as you have recorded them. So,
Sounds good.
front entry, door and surround, the replacement of the windows, the replacement of the planter to something stucco or that appropriate to the style of the house, the research and due diligence on the fountain to get it operable, and the terracotta pavers or some sort of material more in keeping with the house on the back patio area.
Did you include windows in there?
Yeah,
She did.
Yes.
yeah.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Doom, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
And Chair Crignani?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Great.
Approve with conditions, Mills Act conditions.
All
Congratulations.
right. Item number 7 is complete.
Okay, and then, lest we forget that this will ultimately be approved by City Council. So
Yes.
City Council will hear
This is
these
our
conditions,
recommendation, yes.
And if they have any disagreements, they will make that clear, and
Okay.
those would be the final conditions.
All right, item number 8, Planning Division updates and informational briefings. Item A, update on the RFP for the proposed South Cumberland Heights and Casa Verdugo Historic Districts.
So deja vu time, I gave you this update a while ago. The review with the city attorney's office was a little more rigorous than we expected, and so all of those changes were made. The RFP has been issued. It went out on June 26th. We are expecting our proposals back on July 29th, and we take some time, a group of 4 of us staff members review all of the proposals. We have a scoring card. We do it very officially. We kind of run through it and score them on different metrics and come up with a preferred list. We rank the bidders, and then we select our preferred bidder And then, but we do that after we've conducted interviews. So we rank the full group, assuming we get a lot of bids. We narrow it down to a smaller field. We conduct interviews. We select a bidder based on that interview. Then we go to City Council requesting the money because we don't have a line item budget for historic districts because the schedule is kind of random. So we'll go to City Council, and we're expecting to have a contract hopefully by November. So.
Great.
So it's progress,
Progress.
and progress in a very slow way.
Thank you for all your hard efforts in that regard.
Thank you.
That's your update?
Yeah.
That concludes?
That's everything I've got. Yeah.
Okay. With that, we're adjourned at 6:29.